The galaxy had lived in fear for centuries, a fear that no one spoke about, a fear that hung in the air like a shadow, slowly choking the life out of every civilization. No one knew where it had come from or when it had begun, but the galaxy was under its grip. The stars themselves seemed dimmer, as though something unseen was swallowing their light. At the edges of space, entire systems had gone dark, and no one dared to ask why. War, sickness, and despair had spread like wildfire, all without a clear enemy. But the truth was, no one was brave enough to search for the cause. The Council of the Nine, the greatest authority in the galaxy, sat in a grand room, silent, troubled. For generations, they had ruled over billions of species, guiding them toward peace and prosperity. But even their immense power couldn't stop the panic spreading throughout the galaxy. Reports flooded in from every corner of space. Outposts, once thriving with life, now stood abandoned. No warning, no distress signal, just silence. Entire planets disappeared overnight, their populations wiped out without a trace. And yet there was no enemy. No fleets, no armies, no ships bearing the insignia of some invading force. It was as if the universe itself had decided to turn its back on them. And the galaxy, once confident in its dominance, was crumbling under the weight of this invisible force. Captain Ilara Quinn stood on the observation deck of the human cruiser Raven's Blade, looking out into the endless void of space. Her crew was on high alert, ready for anything. The mysterious force that had plagued the galaxy had reached the edge of human space. No one had any idea what they were dealing with, but they were about to find out. Ilara had seen the destruction firsthand. She had visited colonies where the buildings still stood, but the people were gone, as if they had vanished into thin air. She felt a heavy weight in her chest as the ship drifted closer to the system known as Varnak 7, a place where no ships had returned from in years. The reports were all the same. Ships had gone missing, and no one knew why. But Ilara wasn't one to run from fear. Humanity had been the underdogs for too long. It was time for them to step up. The quiet hum of the ship's engines was the only sound in the room, broken only by the soft voice of her communications officer, Lieutenant Rylan. "Captain, we've received a distress signal from a nearby outpost. It's faint, but it's there." Ilara's eyes sharpened. A distress signal meant someone had survived. It was the first sign of hope in what felt like forever. "Plot a course, Lieutenant. Let's find out who's still out there." The crew worked quickly, preparing the ship for a quick jump to the outpost. As the Raven's Blade entered warp speed, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The signal was too weak, too faint. Whatever had caused the destruction across the galaxy had no intention of letting them find answers. Minutes turned into hours, and as the ship arrived at the coordinates, the first thing Ilara noticed was the silence. There were no ships in orbit, no signs of life. The station, once a bustling hub, now floated lifelessly in the dark void. They approached cautiously, scanning for any sign of movement, but everything appeared still. The distress signal was coming from deep inside the station, but there was no indication of what had caused it. Ilara ordered a shuttle team to board the station and investigate. The shuttle descended into the station's docking bay, and the crew disembarked, weapons drawn, as they entered the darkened halls. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay. The walls were lined with broken panels and equipment, most of which was inactive. But there was something else, something more unsettling. The crew couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. As they moved deeper into the station, they came across a sealed door. The distress signal was coming from behind it. Ilara's hand hovered over the control panel. "Open it," she ordered. The door slid open with a heavy metallic groan. Inside, they found the source of the signal, a single figure, slumped against the wall. A human. His uniform was torn, his face pale and covered in sweat. His eyes were wide open, but there was no sign of life in them. Ilara rushed to his side, checking for a pulse. There was none. Rylan stepped forward, his voice low. "What happened to him?" "I don't know," Ilara replied, her voice steady despite the growing unease in her chest. "But this man, he's been through something none of us can understand." They scanned the room for any clues, but the only thing they found was a strange symbol etched into the wall. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before, a series of intersecting lines, sharp angles, and a single point in the center. It seemed to pulse with a faint glow, as if alive. "What is that?" Rylan asked, stepping closer. "I don't know," Ilara said again, "but I have a feeling we're about to find out." As the team continued to investigate, the silence was broken by a sudden, sharp noise, a crackling sound like static electricity. The lights flickered. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. Something was coming. Something was watching them. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw it. A shadow. A shape moving in the dark corners of the room, too fast for her to track. She spun around, her pulse racing, but there was nothing there. The room was empty once more. For a moment, she wondered if she had imagined it, but the feeling of being watched, the sensation that they were not alone, was undeniable. "Captain," Ryland's voice was urgent, "we need to get out of here. This place feels wrong." Ilara nodded, her instincts kicking in. "Let's go. We'll report back to the fleet." As they moved back toward the shuttle, the air seemed to grow colder, the darkness closing in around them. The sense of dread was overwhelming, but Ilara kept her focus. She had no time for fear. Not now. Just as they reached the shuttle bay, the door slammed shut with a deafening crash, trapping them inside. Panic surged through the crew. They were stuck. But before anyone could react, the lights went out entirely. In the pitch-black darkness, a voice echoed through the station, a voice deep, ancient, and impossibly cold. "You should have stayed away." The words hung in the air, sending a chill down Ilara's spine. She had no idea who or what had spoken, but one thing was clear. Whatever this force was, it was far more dangerous than they had imagined. And now, humanity had no choice but to face it. The shuttle bay door opened slowly, and the crew stepped outside, weapons ready, but the world around them had changed. The station no longer felt like a place of refuge. It felt like a tomb, and somewhere, out in the void, something ancient and terrible was watching them, waiting for the next move. Ilara's mind raced. What was this force? Where had it come from? And why was humanity, of all species, being drawn into the heart of it? The answers, she knew, were just beyond their reach. But one thing was certain. Humanity wasn't going to run. They were going to fight, no matter the cost, because the galaxy had lived in fear for too long, and it was time for humanity to respond. The shuttle soared through the dark expanse of space, carrying Captain Ilara Quinn and her team away from the abandoned station, but the weight of what they had discovered lingered like a shadow. The feeling of being watched, the strange symbols, the cryptic warning, it all gnawed at Ilara's mind. As the ship entered hyperspace, she sat quietly in her chair, her fingers tapping anxiously against the armrest. The questions that had been brewing since the Discovery refused to quiet themselves. Who had been behind the attack? What was the force that had wiped out entire systems, entire species, without a single trace? Lieutenant Rylan, who had been unusually silent since their departure, finally broke the silence. "Captain, I've been analyzing the data from the station. The symbol we found, it's unlike anything we've seen before. I ran a scan, and it doesn't match any known language or script in the database. It's something entirely different." Ilara nodded, her gaze still fixed ahead. "We need answers. We've crossed into uncharted territory, and I don't think this is just some random attack. This is something much older, and far more dangerous." As they made their way back to the human fleet, the weight of the situation settled on Ilara's shoulders. Humanity had been relatively untouched by the galactic conflicts that had torn other civilizations apart. But now, They were thrust into the heart of something that could change the course of history, something none of them fully understood. The fleet's command center was a flurry of activity when they docked. Ilara was greeted by Admiral Vance, the gruff leader of the human military, who wasted no time getting straight to the point. "Captain, we've been monitoring the reports. Whatever you encountered out there, it's spreading. Systems around us are already reporting strange occurrences, flickers in communication, ships disappearing. It's like the galaxy itself is turning against us." "I've seen it firsthand, Admiral," Ilara replied, her voice steady, but filled with an edge of urgency. "It's not just the technology malfunctioning. It's like something is interfering with our minds. The fear, it's contagious. It's spreading like a disease. The more we fear it, the more it takes." Vance's face hardened. "And what about the station? Did you find anything else?" Ilara hesitated, glancing toward the team behind her. "Yes, there was something in the station, something ancient, but we didn't get a chance to fully investigate. We need to go back." "No," Vance interrupted, his voice firm. "We can't afford to take any unnecessary risks. We've already lost too many ships in this sector. We need a plan, Captain. Not another wild goose chase." Ilara clenched her fists. She understood his concern, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. "We can't stop now, Admiral. We need to find out what's behind this before it spreads any further. If we don't understand what we're dealing with, it will destroy us." Vance's eyes narrowed. "And you think you can find that out by going back to a haunted station? You're playing with fire, Quinn." Ilara's gaze hardened. "Then give me permission to take that risk. Because if we don't fight now, we'll be too late. All of us." For a moment, the two locked eyes, and the weight of the decision hung between them. Finally, Vance sighed. "You have your orders, Captain, but you better bring back something useful this time." With that, Ilara turned to her team. "Prepare for another jump. We're going back." The journey back to Varnac 7 was swift, and this time, the tension aboard the ship was palpable. No one spoke much as the stars outside streaked by in a blur of light. Ilara felt the pressure mounting on her shoulders with each passing minute. She knew that what they were about to face would be unlike anything they had ever dealt with before, but they had no choice. The galaxy was on the brink of collapse, and it was up to humanity to figure out what had caused it. The station loomed ahead as they dropped out of hyperspace, its outline barely visible against the backdrop of the void. The shuttle crew geared up once again, weapons ready, and descended toward the station's docking bay. The air felt thick with the same oppressive silence that had greeted them before, but this time there was something different. A strange hum filled the air, as if the station itself was alive. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke. Inside the station, the darkness seemed even deeper than before. The abandoned hall stretched on forever, empty and desolate. Yet there was an unsettling sense that something was just out of sight, waiting. Every step they took was echoed by the sharp sound of their boots on the metal floor, amplified in the silence. "We need to find the central core," Ilara said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's where the symbols might lead us." The deeper they went, the more the tension grew. The station felt like a labyrinth, with twists and turns that didn't seem to make sense. It was as if the walls were shifting, warping with each step. They'd reached a large open chamber, the central core. It was massive, with walls covered in the same strange symbols they had seen before. But now, something else was there. The core, a massive spherical structure, was covered in the same glowing patterns. But there was more. Thick tendrils of energy, dark and pulsing, spiraled from the core and snaked across the room. Ilara's breath caught in her throat as she watched the energy move, almost like it was alive, like it had a mind of its own. She could feel it, deep inside her, calling to her. It wasn't a voice, but it was a presence. It was watching them. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a low, deep rumble echoed through the station. The tendrils surged, and the walls began to pulse in time with the rhythm of the energy. Then, without warning, the ground shook violently, and a voice, distorted and terrifying, filled the chamber. "You have come too far, human." Ilara froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The voice was not like anything she had heard before. It was ancient, powerful, and full of rage, and it was speaking directly to her. "What are you?" Ilara shouted, her voice shaking. "What do you want from us?" The voice laughed, a hollow, mocking sound. "We have waited. We have watched. And now we will see if you are worthy of the galaxy's future." The energy in the room intensified, the tendrils flaring with a blinding light. Ilara's team staggered back, shielding their eyes from the overwhelming brightness. The air was thick with a force they couldn't comprehend. As the light reached its peak, Ilara realized the truth. This was no ordinary enemy. This wasn't just a force of destruction. It was a test for humanity to prove that they were more than just a species of war and fear. And the galaxy was watching. The chamber was silent now, the throbbing energy fading into an eerie stillness that sent a chill down Ilara's spine. Her heart was racing, and her breath was shallow as she tried to process what had just happened. The voice, the energy, everything had felt so real, so incredibly powerful. For a moment, she had wondered if they had made a terrible mistake by returning to the station. But as the tension hung thick in the air, she realized one thing. They had no choice but to face this. "Captain." Lieutenant Ryland's voice was barely a whisper. He was standing a few steps behind her, his face pale, his hand still gripping his weapon. What was that? What just happened? Ilara turned to face her crew, her mind racing. She could still feel the presence in the room, the cold, oppressive weight of something ancient and vast. Whatever it was powerful, and it wasn't afraid to show it. "I don't know," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. "But whatever it is, it's not a force we can fight with weapons alone." The others nodded, but their unease was palpable. The alien energy, the voice, it had been a warning, a challenge, a declaration. They had underestimated the depth of the threat. It wasn't just some foreign enemy bent on destruction. It was something far older, something that had waited for millennia to make its move. As Ilara's crew continued to gather themselves, she knew they had to act fast. Every second spent in the station was a risk. They were already on the edge of something much bigger, and they couldn't afford to hesitate any longer. "Let's move," she said, her voice firm. "We need to find the source of that energy and shut it down before it spreads. If we're going to stop this, we need to understand what we're dealing with." The crew followed her without question, their steps echoing in the chamber as they moved toward the glowing tendrils. Each one of them was on edge, but they all knew this was their only chance. If they didn't act now, whatever force was lurking in the dark could consume them all. The room seemed to warp as they approached the energy source. The walls of the station, once cold and metallic, now appeared to ripple, bending unnaturally as if the very fabric of space was shifting around them. The symbols, too, had changed. They no longer glowed faintly. They were pulsing with a violent intensity, and the air itself felt charged. Ilara's pulse quickened as she neared the core. It was massive, larger than anything she had imagined, and it seemed to be alive, its energy swirling and crackling with an ominous power. She felt its presence press down on her, as though it were aware of her, watching her every move. "Captain, the core is alive," Ryland muttered, his voice a mix of awe and fear. "It's not just technology, it's something more." Ilara nodded grimly. "I know. This is what the galaxy has been afraid of. Whatever this thing is, it has the power to bend reality itself." They stood in front of the core, unsure of what to do next. Ilara's mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle slowly coming together. The symbols, the energy, the voice. They were all connected to something much larger. But what was it? Who had built this station, and for what purpose? Was this ancient force truly the one causing the destruction, Or was it a part of something else? Suddenly, a soft hum filled the air, and the core flickered with an eerie light. Ilara took a step back, her heart racing. The energy surged again, and a voice, that same voice from before, echoed through the room. You still do not understand. You cannot stop what is coming. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. The voice was not just a warning now. It was mocking her, taunting her. It knew they were desperate. It knew they were out of their depth. We are not afraid of you, Ilara shouted, her voice strong, even though the fear inside her was beginning to bubble to the surface. We're not going to run. We'll fight you, whatever you are. The voice seemed to laugh, a low, guttural sound that echoed in Ilara's mind. You cannot fight what you cannot see. You cannot fight what is already within you. A wave of energy shot out from the core, striking the walls of the chamber with a deafening crack. Ilara and her team were thrown back, their bodies slamming against the ground as the room trembled violently. Sparks flew from broken panels, and the walls groaned in protest as the station seemed to shake apart. Get up, Ilara shouted, forcing herself to her feet. We need to get out of here now. But as she rose, she realized something horrifying. The shadows in the room had changed. They had grown darker, more menacing. And they were moving. The walls weren't the only thing warping now. The very space around them seemed to bend and twist, as if reality itself were being rewritten. Ilara's mind struggled to comprehend what was happening, but the truth was becoming painfully clear. The station, the core, the energy, it was all part of something much bigger, something that was rewriting the rules of existence itself. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, sharp pain in her head. It felt like 1,000 voices were screaming in her ears all at once. Voices from the past, from the future, from all the civilizations that had fallen before her. The fear and despair of countless species flooded her mind. And for a moment, she thought she might collapse under the weight of it. But then, something shifted, a small, but unmistakable flicker of resistance. It was human. It was in her. It was in all of them. You won't break us, Ilara whispered through gritted teeth, as the voice continued to flood her mind with images of destruction. We've survived worse than you. For a moment, there was silence. The oppressive pressure lifted, and the dark energy seemed to pause, as if considering her words. Then the voice spoke again, slower this time, almost curious. Survived. Yes, but you will not survive what is to come. You have not seen the true enemy. You have not seen the one who waits. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. Who waits? But before she could hear the answer, the core flared again, sending a burst of blinding light through the chamber. Ilara's team was thrown backward once more, and the station seemed to collapse around them. The walls shattered. The lights flickered and died. And in that moment, it felt as though time itself was slowing down, as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. We have to leave. Now. Ilara screamed, grabbing Ryland's arm and pulling him toward the exit. The team scrambled, struggling to stay on their feet as the station crumbled. The shadows seemed to follow them, whispering, reaching for them. But Ilara didn't stop. She couldn't. The last thing she saw before they made it back to the shuttle was the core, pulsing with a final, deafening roar. And then, everything went dark. The shuttle blasted away from the crumbling station, its engines roaring as it pulled the crew into the safety of space. But despite their escape, the weight of what they had experienced seemed to cling to them like a cloud, heavy and suffocating. Ilara Quinn sat in the command seat, her eyes fixed on the stars ahead, but her mind was far from calm. The ancient voice still echoed in her mind, its chilling words lingering in the silence that filled the shuttle. We have not seen the true enemy. We have not seen the one who waits. The one who waits. The phrase twisted in her thoughts, making her skin crawl. What did it mean? What was the force that had been hiding in the shadows, waiting for humanity to come close enough to challenge it? The voice had made it clear. This wasn't just about a single station, a single enemy. There was something bigger at play here, something that had been lurking for eons, silently watching as civilizations rose and fell. Captain. Lieutenant Ryland's voice broke the silence, though his tone was cautious. We've made the jump. We're in a safe orbit around the fleet's base. But we need to talk. What now? Ilara took a deep breath, trying to focus. They had made it back, but the mission wasn't over. Not by a long shot. We report what we know, she said, her voice steady. But we keep the truth close. We don't know the full extent of what we're up against. Not yet. Ryland nodded, though he looked troubled. You really think humanity's ready for this? To fight? Whatever it is that's out there. Ilara's fingers tightened around the controls. The thought of what she had seen on the station, the fear in the air, and the knowledge that they weren't even fighting the true enemy yet, it was overwhelming. But she knew one thing for sure. Humanity had no choice but to stand strong. We don't have a choice, Ilara answered, her voice hardening. We have to fight. If we don't, everything we know will be consumed. The galaxy will fall, and humanity will be lost with it. As they approached the fleet's command station, the massive structure came into view. It was a fortress in the cold emptiness of space, a bastion of humanity's strength. But as Ilara's eyes scanned the massive fleet, her unease only grew. The threat wasn't just an external force anymore. It was something far more insidious. The voice, the strange energy, it was manipulating their minds, influencing them. Humanity had become part of a much larger game. Upon docking, the crew was met by Admiral Vance once again. His stern face didn't betray the worry that surely simmered beneath his calm exterior. But Ilara could see the exhaustion in his eyes. The entire fleet was on edge. Communications had been spotty, and strange things were happening. Ships disappearing, systems glitching in ways that defied explanation. Captain Quinn. Vance greeted her with a sharp nod. Report. Ilara took a breath, her eyes scanning the room. She knew what she had to do, but it didn't make the weight of the situation any easier to bear. Admiral, we've discovered something far worse than we imagined. The station was part of an ancient network, a system designed by a force that predates anything we've encountered. The energy we felt, it wasn't just technology. It was a living entity, something that is pulling the strings behind the galactic chaos. Vance's eyes narrowed. You're telling me that some thing is behind all of this? Some ancient force? Ilara nodded. Yes, and it's not just a threat to us. It's been watching the galaxy for millennia. It has waited for the right moment to strike. And now, it has set its sights on humanity. Vance frowned, clearly struggling to comprehend the scope of what she was saying. And you think we can fight this? How do we even begin? That's the problem, Ilara said, her voice dark. We don't fully understand what we're up against yet. But whatever it is, it's playing a game. And we're caught in it. This enemy, it's not just a warship or a fleet. It's something beyond that. It manipulates fear. It warps reality. And it's testing us. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. The room was silent, everyone in the command center staring at her with wide, uncertain eyes. The Admiral had no response. No plan. No reassurance. We have to be smarter than it, Ilara continued. We need to outthink it. Outlast it. Whatever it wants, we can't let it get away with it. The silence that followed was thick. The idea of fighting something that wasn't even fully understood was terrifying. But Vance, after a long pause, spoke again. Then we'll do it. But we need to be prepared. I'll order a full mobilization. All ships are to be ready for combat within the hour. We're going to need everything we have if we're to survive whatever this thing is. Ilara nodded, turning to leave, but not before her gaze met the Admiral's once again. And, Admiral, one more thing. Vance raised an eyebrow. What is it? I think it's already here, Ilara said quietly. The signs are all over the fleet. Ships disappearing. The glitches. The weird communication issues. It's all connected. The enemy is here. And if we don't act fast, it will pick us off one by one. Later that night, Ilara stood alone on the observation deck of the fleet station, staring out into the vastness of space. The stars were distant and cold, scattered like grains of sand in an endless ocean. But it was the blackness between the stars that haunted her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking out there. Something ancient, something that had watched and waited. And now, it was ready to strike. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Captain Quinn. She turned to see Rylan approaching, a faint look of concern on his face. Are you all right? He asked. Ilara sighed, her shoulders heavy with the weight of her thoughts. I don't know anymore. Everything's spinning out of control. I thought we had time to prepare, but now I'm not sure we have enough time at all. Rylan stepped closer, his voice soft but firm. We'll find a way to fight back. We always do. Ilara met his gaze, her face filled with determination. You're right. We will. We have to. There's no other choice. But as they stood there, staring into the void, Ilara's gut twisted with an unsettling thought. The galaxy had always feared this enemy, this force that had remained hidden in the darkness. But now, humanity was standing at the edge of something far greater than they could have ever imagined. And the worst part, the real enemy had yet to reveal itself. The fleet was in motion now, each ship bristling with weapons and defenses, ready to face the unknown threat. Ilara Quinn stood in the command center, her eyes focused on the holo-display in front of her, analyzing the fleet's positions and the unknown variables that had kept her awake for the last several nights. But no matter how many strategies she mapped out, one thing remained clear. They weren't ready for what was coming. We're in position, Captain, Lieutenant Ryland said, his voice cutting through the silence in the command center. His eyes flicked to the holo-display, and then to Ilara, a mixture of doubt and determination reflected on his face. Ilara glanced at him, then back at the holographic map. The fleet was clustered around the outer rim of the galaxy, far from the heart of known civilization, where the ancient station had been discovered. Now, they were waiting, every moment feeling like an eternity, as they faced an enemy whose true form had yet to reveal itself. Are we sure there's no other sign of the enemy? Ilara asked, her voice tight with tension. Nothing yet, but the fluctuations in communication systems are continuing. Rylan replied, We're still getting ghost signals, almost like they're probing our systems. It's unsettling. Ilara's mind raced. Every warning they'd received, every strange signal, the shifting reality, they were all symptoms of a presence that was already among them. But how could they stop something they couldn't even see? It wasn't like a typical enemy, with ships or armies to fight. No, this was something far older, and it was playing a game with them. She could feel it. The voice from the station had been clear. You cannot fight what you cannot see. A shiver ran down Ilara's spine. What if it was true? What if they were already outmatched? Captain, Ryland's voice broke through her thoughts. We've got something. Incoming. Ilara turned sharply, looking at the screen. Her heart skipped a beat as the display shifted to show a ripple in space. A disturbance, growing larger, spreading outward like an expanding wave. It wasn't a ship, and it certainly wasn't a normal spatial anomaly. This was different, something unnatural. That's no standard hyperspace jump, Ilara said, her voice low. What the hell is that? Before Ryland could answer, the disturbance began to take shape. The edges of the ripple slowly coalesced, forming a dark, twisting mass at the center of the anomaly. It was almost like a black hole, but it wasn't pulling things toward it. Instead, it was pushing outwards, its influence warping the space around it, making everything distort in its wake. Suddenly, the entire fleet trembled. Ilara, Ryland shouted, We've got incoming. It's like a tidal wave of energy. Ilara's heart raced as the readings on the holo display went haywire. The energy readings were off the charts, spiking dangerously. The fleet's shields began to flicker, unstable against the invisible force sweeping toward them. They weren't prepared for this. Set the fleet to full defensive, Ilara barked. Raise shields. Get everyone ready for impact. But before the command could even be fully given, the fleet was hit with a pulse of energy that knocked every ship off course. Ilara was thrown forward, her hands gripping the console to steady herself. The room seemed to spin as the massive wave of energy spread through the fleet, its impact resonating in their very bones. The lights flickered, the screens malfunctioned, and the very air seemed to hum with a strange, terrifying force. Outside the station windows, the black mass in space grew larger, its center now fully visible, a swirling vortex of nothingness. And then, from within that void, something emerged. It was not a ship. It was not a fleet. It was something else. At first, it appeared to be a mass of dark tendrils, like a living organism, writhing in the vacuum of space. But as it stretched forward, they began to see it more clearly, the shape of a colossal being, towering above them, formed from energy and dark matter. Its silhouette was indistinct, like something formed from the deepest parts of the galaxy, a being that existed beyond the boundaries of time and space. This was not an enemy they could fight. This was the force they had been warned about. A voice, deep and resonant, filled every corner of the fleet's communication channels. It was the same voice they had heard on the station, the voice of the thing that had been pulling the strings. You still do not understand, humans. You are already mine. The words sent a chill down Ilara's spine. She could feel the force pressing against the walls of her mind, suffocating her thoughts, overwhelming her senses. The being was inside them. It was playing with their very perceptions of reality, bending time, space, and even their thoughts. Captain. Ryland's voice was strained, his fingers dancing over the controls, trying to stabilize their position. It's too strong. We can't fight it. Nothing is working. Keep trying, Ryland. Ilara shouted, clenching her fists. They had no other choice. They couldn't surrender. Not yet. Not ever. But even as she spoke, she felt the pull of the void deepening. The presence, this ancient force, was inside her now, its whispers filling her mind, offering her knowledge of the galaxy's deepest secrets. It promised power, immortality, and a place at its side, as if to say that humanity would bow before it, just like the countless species that had fallen before. The reality of their situation began to settle in. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a test, a game of wits, of endurance, of power. And if humanity failed, they would fall into the abyss, like so many others before them. But Ilara wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. She had seen what humanity was capable of. The galaxy had underestimated them for too long, believing they were nothing more than a fleeting spark in the grand cosmos. But humanity had always been resilient, always finding a way to survive and adapt. And now, in the face of an impossible enemy, humanity's true strength would be tested. This isn't the end, Ilara whispered to herself, as the dark mass before them seemed to grow larger still, blocking out the stars. We're not done yet. Suddenly, the voice spoke again, its tone even colder this time. Your fight is over. You will not survive what is to come. You cannot defy me. Ilara's heart hammered in her chest, but she refused to give in. She would not be the one to allow humanity's story to end here. Not with an enemy that was still hiding in the dark, still testing them. We will fight, she said, louder this time, with every ounce of her resolve. And you'll learn just how strong we really are. As the galaxy's greatest challenge loomed on the horizon, Ilara and her crew knew one thing. The final battle had just begun, and humanity would not go down without a fight.